My daughter brought my wife home drunk. Past midnight, I was under the sink fixing a leak when the door burst open. Emily half-carried Laura across the tiles, both soaked in silence. My wife's dress was inside out, one shoe missing, lipstick on her neck, not her lips. "We need the bathroom," Emily said. No eye contact, no explanation. I stood up, dripping. Laura looked right through me, giggled and slurred. "No guys allowed." Then the door slammed shut. I didn't ask. I didn't knock. I listened. Through the wall, I heard Laura whisper, "Don't tell him." And something in me, quietly, cleanly, broke. Not out of jealousy, but recognition. Because that was the moment I knew. My daughter had picked her side, and it wasn't mine. From that night on, I stopped asking questions and started preparing for answers. If this were your family, what would you have done? Hit subscribe and follow the truth all the way to the end. Emily shouldered Laura into the hallway, wet footprints stippling the tile. The bathroom light bled under the door, harsh and yellow. I rose from the cabinet, wrench slick in my hand, and saw the smear of red along Laura's jaw, a crooked banner no wedding ring could explain. Her dress was inside out, tag scraping her shoulder like a cheap confession. Emily kept her head down and guided her past me, a nurse with no training, a daughter acting older than the night. The house smelled like perfume and mildew, like a motel trying to be a home. I wanted to say something simple. "Are you okay?" But the words tasted like pennies. Laura giggled, then winced, and clutched the doorframe as if it had sworn an oath to protect her. "We need the bathroom," Emily said, voice flat. The lock clicked. Water thundered on. A line had been drawn in steam, and I was standing on the wrong side of it. Suspicion doesn't arrive like a storm. It seeps in under the door and makes itself at home. I stood in the hallway and timed my breath to the pipes, trying to slow the shake in my hands. Men my age pretend we're built for certainty, but the hardest work I've done has been holding still when the answer might break me. On job sites, a hairline crack tells you more than a loud snap. You learn to hear the quiet warnings. Tonight had that sound. The shower roared. A bottle knocked porcelain. Emily's whisper floated above it, too soft to catch. I pictured birthdays, lake afternoons, the bad comedy we used to love, and felt those memories step back from me like polite strangers. I didn't pray for innocence. I bargained for clarity I could stand. Give me one clean thing, I thought. A lie I can name, or a truth I can lift without dropping my daughter in my arms. Steam rolled under the door, carrying the ghost of drugstore flowers. I knocked once, open palm, the way dads do when the line between privacy and worry turns thin. "Em," I said. "You need anything?" The water got louder instead of answering. A beat later, the fan kicked on and swallowed the rest. I tried again, gentler. "Towels? Fresh clothes?" My phone buzzed in my pocket like a trapped wasp. I let it. When Emily finally spoke, her voice came from inches away but felt a mile off. "We're fine, Dad." 2 words I've heard 1,000 times. 2 words that almost never mean fine. Through the wood I heard movement, the clink of a zipper, the rough scrub of shame pretending to be hygiene. "Em," I said, "look at me." The door stayed shut. "Please." Silence settled, then she added, "Give us a minute." It sounded like a promise and a warning, braided tight. I waited in that hallway. The fan wobbled, ticking like a loose ceiling tile in a church basement. Water slowed. Voices rose and fell, muffled by steam and shame. Then Laura's whisper cut through, thin as fishing line. "Don't tell him." Not a plea. An order. The kind of line people practice in the mirror before the night even starts. I felt something small and old climb my spine every time I'd chosen peace over questions, every time I'd thought love meant turning the light off and hoping for morning. In the kitchen, the ice maker coughed, a house habit that usually made me smile. Tonight it sounded like a witness clearing its throat. "Em," I said, steady now. "Open the door." The lock turned, paused, and turned again. No opening, just the polite click of boundaries being enforced. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I counted slowly to 30, the way I once did at bedtime, and learned who bedtime was really soothing back then. Cracks don't announce themselves. They wait for quiet, then travel. Standing alone in the hall, I felt a line run across me, neat and invisible, the way winter finds glass. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even grief. It was a decision cooling into shape. Guys like me get told to fight or forgive. Nobody tells you about the third road. Observe, record, remember. I wiped my hands on a shop towel and noticed the black smear it left, a mechanic's Rorschach. The picture looked like a house splitting down the middle. That night, something in me cracked, I said to the empty air, trying the sentence on like a borrowed coat. In the mirror over the sink, a man looked back who knew how to wait. The shower shut off. The fan kept spinning, stubborn as pride. Footsteps shuffled. My heart didn't race. It measured. When the door finally opened, the air changed temperature, and so did I, for good measure. Emily came out first, hair damp, face pale in the bathroom light. She carried a laundry basket like a shield and wouldn't let it touch me as she passed. Laura followed, wrapped in a towel that used to be white. Her eyes slid over mine, hunting for a version of me that wouldn't look back. I met them anyway. "Dad," Emily said, gentle, practiced. "She's not feeling well." The sentence wobbled like a chair with one short leg. I nodded, partly to her, partly to the life we were improvising. Then I caught it. Small, fast, undeniable. The look you give someone when you've borrowed something and can't return it. Guilt, bright as a match, then gone. She opened her mouth, closed it, and steered Laura toward the bedroom. "I'll clean up," I said. "Go rest." The hallway emptied, but the air stayed crowded. Right there, I chose my job: make space, make notes, make sure this never happens again to us. Before the hairline cracks, we had easy days that felt sturdy. Saturdays meant the grill, folding chairs, Emily chasing the dog through irrigation spray. I'd man the tongs like a foreman while Laura tuned the patio radio to old country, humming while she sliced tomatoes. We knew the rhythm: paper plates, lake in the late afternoon, fireworks on holidays that startled the geese but delighted the kids. There's a photo from that stretch: Laura in a ball cap, sunburned nose, pretending to steal a burger while I shield the platter with a spatula. People like us measure time in routines, and those days clicked like a well-kept clock. We argued about lawn height and movie choices, nothing that left a mark. When friends asked how we were, I'd say, "solid," and mean it with my whole chest. Back then, the house held laughter in its drywall. If you listened after dark, you could hear it settling, like a roof after rain. She was my first everything. The person who taught me a hand can feel like home. First kiss in a pickup, first apartment with a couch we found on the curb, first winter we learned to layer sweaters and laugh at the bill. We celebrated small wins with diner pie and split the crust like a contract. When Emily was born, I thought my life had signed its name. Laura picked paint, I installed the crib, and we promised each other ordinary miracles: flu shots, parent-teacher nights, oil changes before road trips. People talk about grand gestures. We built a life from smaller ones, the way a fence is 1,000 nails agreeing. Years later, I drove past the church where we whispered vows and wondered how two whispers could sound so loud. That certainty lived in my chest like a furnace. If it dimmed, I turned up the gas and it warmed again. Back then, love felt like gravity I could trust. The first changes were quiet enough to pass for mood. A different perfume, a new laugh, a fresh playlist that didn't match the station she used to love. Girls' night got penciled in more often, then inked. Her phone started landing face down on the table like a coin that refused to roll. I told myself she deserved space. Every grown marriage does. Folks at work brag about freedom, but the best part of home is the way it holds you, even when you're not easy to hold. I checked the calendar and found more white space than plans. Emily noticed it too, in the careful way she asked what time Mom would be back. On a Tuesday, Laura came in late and blamed traffic that never touches our side of town. The story wasn't the problem. It was the new smile that came with it, polite, sealed, and meant for a doorway I didn't stand in anymore. You can tell a lot from a dinner table. Ours used to sound like forks tapping out applause for bad jokes. Lately, the applause turned into manners. Laura scrolled, then flipped the phone upside down as if the grain of the wood could read it. "Long day," she said, stirring pasta she never tasted. Emily offered a story about a class presentation, the kind that once earned big reactions. Tonight it landed light and slid off the edge. I asked Laura what the joke was. She said, "Oh, nothing," and laughed into her glass. Men my age keep a toolbox of simple tests. So I tried one: leave the dishes, walk the dog, come back early. The house has a way of telling the truth when it thinks you've gone. The TV murmured, the faucet dripped, the phone lit up twice. The message preview wasn't a smoking gun. It didn't have to be. The way she smiled at the screen was loud enough. On the porch that night, the swing talked in small creaks while I counted lightning bugs like a kid who never learned to quit. Every husband I know keeps a private ledger, little reasons we give ourselves to keep believing. She's tired, she's restless, she needs friends. I didn't write those lines down, but they wrote themselves across the siding. A neighbor waved from the sidewalk, and I waved back like a man whose house wasn't tilting. When Laura stepped out, she smelled like the bar by the grocery store, where the lights are soft so people can forgive themselves. "Girls' night," she said, and kissed my cheek with a mouth that felt like a rain check. I poured her water and told her to sleep. It wasn't mercy. It was a timeout for my heartbeat. The porch light hummed, the swing settled, and I filed the evening where hard days go, some box inside labeled later, the lid already starting to bulge. Weeks slipped by in tidy explanations, until one evening I stood in the hallway and saw our family photo crooked on the nail. The frame had been straight for years. I fixed it, stepped away, and watched it lean again, a tired shoulder against paint. In the picture, we're by the lake in matching jackets, sunlight turning Emily's hair into wheat. Laura's hand is on my chest, mine is on her back. The pose looks natural, but I could suddenly see the director hiding in the bushes, me, coaching everyone to smile on three, begging time to behave. People say homes settle. Maybe so. But this felt different, like the walls were making room for someone I couldn't see. I touched the glass and didn't recognize the man behind it. That was the moment the roles shifted. Husband, father, provider, sure. Yet somehow, standing in my own hallway, I'd become the extra in a life I built. Emily went quiet in a way that didn't look like teenage mood. It looked like strategy. Breakfast used to come with small stories: the bus route detour, a classmate's odd haircut, a teacher who loved puns. Lately she buttered toast without a word and carried it to her room like contraband. I stirred coffee I'd already finished, just to make a sound. The dog paced between us, confused by the new rules. When I asked about her day, she said, "Fine," and rearranged the silverware that didn't need rearranging. Men my age know that silence has flavors. This one tasted like somebody else's secret. On a Sunday drive, she stared out at the car lots and pretended to count blue sedans. I watched her reflection in the passenger window, the way you watch weather building on the far side of a lake. I didn't press. Pressing felt like poking a bruise you can't afford to show your kid you feel tonight. Laura started naming friends I'd never heard of, women with soft, interchangeable names that sounded borrowed from holiday newsletters. "Megan," she said one Thursday, waving her phone like a hall pass. Later that night, the parking app pinged a location across town, near a bar where birthdays go to disappear. When she came home, her story wore new shoes, and the receipt in her purse wore different ones. I rinsed a glass and asked about the night. She smiled in a way that canceled follow-ups. "Just us girls," she said, already walking down the hall. Couples learn each other's grammar. Hers added detours where there used to be roads. The next week, Tara canceled at the last minute, but the lipstick stain on Laura's straw had a cologne shadow. I didn't accuse anyone. I recorded the details the way a contractor writes measurements, careful, exact, knowing the wall only stands straight when the numbers finally tell the truth for me. I was folding laundry when the scent hit, something sweet and cheap layered over the soft soap we've used since Emily's allergy scare. It wasn't ours. It lingered like a guest who missed the hint. Laura's blouse carried it, a neon arrow stitched in smell. I held the fabric and remembered the first cologne I ever bought, how my boss said use less if you wanted more. People forget that advice when they're trying to be seen in rooms that aren't theirs. At dinner, the fragrance kept arriving before she did, rounding corners like a rumor. Emily noticed. Her fork paused mid-air, then landed quiet. I didn't mention it. Instead, I stacked plates and counted to 10 while the air did math on its own. After the dishwasher hummed alive, Laura kissed my cheek, thanked me for the help, and walked past trailing that stranger's signature. The house filed the smell under evidence, and I followed it down the hall later. In the garage, I reached for the shelf and knocked my ring of keys to the floor. They scattered with that flat music every dad recognizes: house, truck, toolbox, mailbox, little medals that stand in for control. I knelt to gather them and watched my hand shake, not from fear, but from the steady realization that control is mostly a story we tell our thumbs. The truck key bit my palm. I closed my fist until the teeth left a map. Guys like me think better with an ache to focus us. Once the sting settled, I lined the keys by size like wrenches and picked the smallest one up last. It opened the lock on a dusty cabinet where I keep instruction manuals and old receipts, evidence that things once made sense. I didn't open the cabinet yet. I just pressed the cool metal to my neck and breathed until the shake smoothed out enough to plan my next step carefully. At work the next morning, I leveled a beam and thought about noise. Construction teaches you which sounds matter: the clean snap that means trouble, the quiet sag that means more. Betrayal doesn't scream, it whispers. It changes the way someone closes a door, the delay before a reply, the new habit of laughing at nothing. During lunch, the guys argued about football while I measured how long Laura took to answer a text. 43 minutes. The number felt like a weather report only I could hear. I didn't text again. Instead, I wrote a list on a scrap of cardboard. Smells, times, names. The pencil left grooves as if it wanted to make the paper remember. On the drive home, a song from our first year came on the radio, and I let it play to the end, hoping it would pull the past forward. It stayed where it was. The present rode shotgun and stared straight ahead anyway. That evening, I tried a small experiment. While clearing plates, I said, casual as weather, "Ran into David at the hardware store." The name landed like a coin on glass. Small sound, big meaning. Laura's fork stopped midair. Her eyes flashed left, then right, like someone checking exits. It was a second, maybe less, but the house recorded it better than any camera. Emily glanced up, reading us both, then looked away, the way kids do when they want to spare you. I set the plates in the sink and let the water run so nobody had to talk first. Laura recovered with a smile that showed no teeth. "Tell him I said hello," she managed, voice smooth as a hotel hallway. I didn't push the conversation. Instead, I watched that smile try to hold. It trembled, then stayed. The tremble was enough. From that blink forward, the doubt wasn't a theory anymore. It had a name, and the name answered. The garage smelled like oil and old summers, and that's where I made the call. Doubt had outgrown guesswork. It needed light. A buddy from church once said, "Protect your peace and do it by the book." So I read what I needed to read, learned what a husband is allowed to document inside his own walls, and chose a tool that minds its own business until it doesn't. No spy thrill, no cowboy move, just a quiet safeguard for a house that had stopped speaking plain. I charged the little device, watched the indicator breathe, and pictured the rooms we loved like children. The hallway with the growth marks, the kitchen where pancakes turned out better on Sundays, the bedroom that used to be a promise. Men my age keep ledgers. Mine was ready for ink. I didn't feel brave. I felt responsible. When the light turned steady, I set my jaw, carried the box inside, and let intention walk ahead of me. I moved through the house like a maintenance man on a service call. Slow steps, clean hands, eyes tuned to corners people forget. Nothing dramatic, no drills, no clever tricks, just a common device tucked where it could watch without becoming the story. I checked sight lines the way I check studs before hanging a shelf, thinking about how homes hold our lives even when we stop holding each other well. The living room framed our history in family photos. The hallway carried the habit of footsteps. The bedroom belonged to all the vows we said and failed. I kept the frame wide, the angles honest, the purpose simple. The app connected with a polite chime, and the cloud did what clouds do, kept what was given, quiet and exact. I breathed out and listened to the house settle. Fans hummed, pipes ticked. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's mower coughed. Nothing changed, not yet. But the silence had a different weight, and it knew. That first hour tasted like mixed coffee, half bitter, half warm. There's a guilt to watching your own life that nobody warns you about. It sits on your shoulder and asks if you still recognize the man you promised to be. Relief sits on the other shoulder and says, finally, we can stop pretending. In the kitchen, I wiped the counter twice, though it was already clean, a nervous habit I picked up after layoffs years back. Emily came in, grabbed an apple, and kissed my cheek like always. We talked about a quiz, about gas prices, about nothing, the good kind. When she left, the house exhaled and I stood in the middle of it counting to 10. I didn't want a shock. I wanted clarity. Adults earn that much. The screen on my phone showed a quiet room being quiet. No alarms, no movement, just a bed, a window, a door. You'd think that would comfort a husband. It did and didn't. Day 1 logged like a blank page. Afternoon errands, a neighbor waving, Emily's music crawling under her door. Laura texted dinner plans. Nothing heavy, she said. So I thawed chili and stirred it slow like my mother taught me, clockwise for luck. We ate with the TV low and let the anchors tell other people's troubles. Afterward, I walked the trash to the curb and stared longer than necessary at a moon that looked like a clipped fingernail. Back inside, the room on the screen remained ordinary in that stubborn way a room can be when a family is trying to pass for fine. Stillness is not the same as peace. Folks who've lived a little know that truth in their kneecaps. I checked locks, set the alarm, folded laundry nobody asked me to fold. Somewhere near midnight, the feed blinked, then settled. Nothing to see, nothing to name. The absence of proof is its own noise. I heard every second of it. By the third day, the house had learned my new routine. I brewed coffee early, answered emails with the patience of a man saving his best words, and kept the app where a wallet goes. Late afternoon, the light turned honey, and the dog slept like a rug beside the fridge. That's when the screen shifted. Not drama, arrangement. Laura entered the frame with a purpose I remembered from holidays. Straightening, smoothing, making a stage of what used to be a nest. Fresh sheets tucked twice. A quick spray of sweet perfume that didn't belong to our story. A glance at the clock, then another. Folks who host practice hospitality. This was a different kind of welcome. My thumb hovered. My chest went still. In the hallway, the growth marks looked back at me like witnesses. Down the street, a delivery truck hissed to a stop. The room waited with her, tidy as a sale photo. Then the doorbell rang, and the house chose sides. Time stretches when you expect impact. It shrinks when it lands. The door opened with that everyday click I've heard 1,000 times, and a familiar voice filled the hallway like a song you regret liking. Shoes scraped. A low laugh, private and practiced. The frame stayed steady, but something in me didn't. I felt the floor find my weight the way a dock learns a boat. Men like me don't rehearse lines for moments like this. We learn to breathe past them. In the room, there were hands where vows used to be, and a smile I recognized from our early years, built now for someone else's camera. I didn't speak. The device kept the record I couldn't interrupt, simple and unblinking. People say truth arrives loud. It arrived exact. The house, the walls, the bed, we all knew at the same time. When the screen dimmed and saved, I locked my jaw, placed the phone face down, and understood the next chapter had started. The notification sounded like any other, polite, small, forgettable, motion detected. I was in the garage sorting screws by size, the kind of chore a man reaches for when his mind needs order. The phone vibrated again, a friend clearing its throat. I wiped my hands on an old shop towel and opened the app. The room appeared, bed made, curtains breathing a little, afternoon light running across the carpet like a careful visitor. Then the frame shifted. A shadow crossed the threshold, followed by a laugh I'd heard through birthdays and bills and 1,000 ordinary Thursdays. Laura stepped in first, smoothing her hair, checking the mirror we once hung together. The door stayed open a heartbeat longer than courtesy, as if it knew what came next. I braced my elbow on the workbench the way I do when a heavy board needs steadying. The house had raised a hand. The moment asked for quiet. I answered with both feet on the floor. He came in easy, the way people enter places that have already welcomed them. David's voice rode the hallway like a familiar tune a radio won't stop playing. He didn't tiptoe. He belonged. That was the message, and it arrived without words. Laura's smile reached for him, not me, and found the version of her I used to know when we were fresh and brave and poor. They moved through the room with a practiced patience, as if the calendar had taught them when to breathe. I watched and felt my tools become witnesses, the level by the vise, the pencil behind my ear, the tape measure that only speaks in inches and truth. People think shock is loud. Sometimes it's a hush with perfect posture. Emily's science fair ribbon hung on the corkboard above my bench, blue as a bruise. I touched it, set the phone down to steady my hand, and picked it up again because steadiness mattered more. Silence makes a different noise when you're not alone. I stood with my back to the garage door and watched two people cross a bridge I spent years hammering into place. That was our bed. My daughter's laughter still lived there, trapped in the headboard the way summer air hides in attic wood. The nightstand wore the water rings of 100 careful mornings. On the dresser, a picture from Emily's first swim lesson leaned against a lamp. Her arms out, her eyes enormous, Laura's shadow behind her like a promise. The camera didn't flinch. It isn't built to. They sat on the edge of the mattress and spoke low, bodies angled toward each other like a plan already agreed to. Men like me want to fix, to unspool, to rewind a screw that stripped itself. There's no tool for this. The frame kept breathing. Time, for once, refused. I held my breath because the room had forgotten how to share air. I watched without moving, the kind of stillness you learn on rooftops when a gust tests your ladder. Under the fluorescent hum, the garage smelled like dust and walnut stain. Inside, David touched her wrist the way a man touches something he thinks he owns. Laura tilted her face into that touch and smiled the way she used to smile at me when the rent was late and we laughed anyway. The app's timer counted seconds like a metronome that didn't care about feelings. I could hear the neighbor's leaf blower, the dog 2 houses down, the world insisting it was an ordinary day. Every now and then, a picture frame in the background flashed a tiny glint where the glass caught light. Blink, 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 as if it wanted to warn me. I didn't blink back. I let the truth stand up straight and take its full height. It reached the ceiling. It pressed on the roof. It did not apologize for existing. I learned to breathe through hard moments in small-town gyms, free throw line, game on the line, everybody louder than sense. Same trick here. In through the nose, count 4, hold, let it go. The counting helped me hear details I'd never forget. The zipper's small apology, the scrape of a shoe, the whispered cadence of names that had no business being that close. People think heartbreak is poetry. It's arithmetic. 4 steps, 2 hands, 1 bed. I steadied the phone on a stack of paint cans and stared until the screen went from window to mirror. My face showed up there beside them, pale and patient, a foreman checking a job he wishes he could shut down. I remembered installing that headboard, the way the lag screws bit true, and how Laura laughed when I told her it would outlast us. Maybe it will. Maybe that's the problem. The numbers added up. The answer didn't need me to say it out loud. When it was done, or when my heart decided it had seen enough, the screen dimmed for a breath, then saved to the cloud with a small icon that looked like a parachute. Proof doesn't arrive with trumpets. It arrives with a timestamp and a file size. I set the phone down face up, then flipped it over. The garage settled around me like a coat after rain. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a kid practiced jump shots against a driveway hoop, thunk, thunk, thunk. That sound used to mean hope. Tonight it marked time. I turned off the feed the way you kill a porch light when company has stayed too long. The workbench edge met my ribs and held. I could hear the blood in my ears, a low drum that matched the old water heater's sigh. No words, no shout, no prayer, just breath and bone. I pressed the power button until the glass went dark and listened to my heartbeat continue. Confrontation would have been easy. It would have given everyone a script and me a short burst of relief. I chose planning instead. In the garage, I laid out a yellow pad and drew 3 columns: assets, evidence, exits. The words looked clinical, like a discharge form. I listed accounts, policy numbers, passwords written in pencil code only I could read. I checked state law again, careful as a man measuring a beam before he climbs. I called the credit union about a safe deposit box and practiced sounding casual. At lunch, I bought a pocket scanner and a fresh notebook. That evening, I photographed documents on the kitchen table while spaghetti simmered and Emily asked about tires. The ordinary things were anchors. They kept the room from floating away. I made a calendar of quiet moves. Mondays for numbers, Wednesdays for copies, Fridays for thinking. A plan is a shelter you build one nail at a time, for now. I started with small transfers, the kind banks don't flag because households move money all the time. Paychecks split a little wider into my personal account, a new savings line at the credit union, an automatic roundup that fed a bucket. I called our insurer and confirmed beneficiaries, then requested duplicate statements mailed to the box at work. Receipts went into labeled envelopes: mortgage, utilities, subscriptions, the clockwork ribs of a life. I scanned the files and named them like a carpenter names pieces: joist, brace, ledger. A friend from softball knew a lawyer who consults over coffee. We met at a diner, booth by the window, and I told the story without drama. He said, "Keep collecting, keep still." I didn't ask for a timeline. Instead, I built one. Camera archives organized by week, phone logs printed and highlighted, calendar screenshots saved with dates in the file name. When fear arrived, I gave it a task and watched it leave. I kept my temper on a leash and fed it numbers: bank balances, pay stubs, mileage, timestamps. Revenge isn't rage, it's math. Rage burns fast and blinds you. Math lights a lamp and shows the edges. I built a spreadsheet on the laptop I use for taxes, a plain grid that didn't care who was right, only what was true. Columns for dates, sources, copies stored, who might need what when the talking starts. I practiced answers in the mirror, short and decent, the kind a judge respects and a daughter can live with. At night, I set alerts and backed up files to 3 places, because cabinets flood and phones fail. In the morning, I made coffee, sent Emily off with a joke, and checked my list before work. The rhythm helped. It turned fear into tasks, and tasks into progress. When anger knocked, I let the spreadsheet answer. It spoke in totals that told me to keep going. On the outside, I kept our house running like a sitcom rerun. Breakfast at 7, trash on Tuesdays, yard trimmed before the weekend so the HOA wouldn't send a letter. I kissed Laura's cheek when she left and asked about her day when she returned, the way good husbands do when they're choosing patience over theater. I packed Emily's lunch with a sticky note that said, "Proud of you, kiddo," and meant every letter. At church, I stacked chairs, nodded at neighbors, and took the longer route to the parking lot so small talk could finish itself. Inside, the checklist hummed. Photos backed up, accounts balanced, a lawyer's card folded in my wallet like a spare key. Laura laughed more than usual, almost like happiness, almost like rehearsal. The camera stayed quiet, but not sleeping. I didn't tip my hand. If Payne wanted a scene, it could audition elsewhere. My role called for steady eyes, clean hands, and believable love. Laura floated through the days as if the air had turned lighter. New hair, nails, playlists with summer still in them. She laughed at sitcom reruns we'd already memorized and left the room during commercials to answer messages that couldn't sit. Friends commented on her glow in the produce aisle, and she thanked them like she'd found a new vitamin. At dinner, she called me by my name more often, a habit that once meant trouble at work and now meant distance at home. Emily watched us like a referee who hates the whistle. I kept the counters wiped and the stories simple. The device did its job. The cloud kept its promises. When Laura hugged me, it was sideways, the way people hug coworkers at retirement parties. She smelled like someone else's evening. I straightened the frame in the hallway and let it lean again. Some truths teach themselves best. I folded dish towels and let time study us. Preparation changed the shape of my days. Morning lists, evening backups, a new habit of walking the perimeter after dark like a homeowner learning his fence again. I spoke less and listened more, the way a coach watches the other sideline for patterns. Laura's calendar filled itself. Mine cleared space. I lifted what could be lifted from joint accounts without starving the pantry, then set alerts so surprises would arrive to me first. Emily and I cooked together more. She chopped, I stirred. We let the radio do the talking. On Sundays, I drove the long way home, past the lake in our photo, and let the water remind me that steady can look like still from far away. People asked if we were good. I said we were fine and went on with my cart. The plan held. The evidence grew. Anger cooled into something usable. When the moment reached my door, I didn't rush it. I simply waited. Anniversaries carry their own electricity. Some folks renew vows by the lake or splurge on a weekend trip. I circled our date on the calendar and let the ink sit until it felt permanent. The choice wasn't spite, it was symmetry. If love had a birthday, truth could blow out the candles. I called the community hall where we once hosted a fundraiser for Emily's school. Good parking, easy access, a sound system older than the custodian but still dependable. The manager remembered my name, asked about the family, and offered the larger room, since you two always draw a crowd. I booked it without blinking. On the drive home, I passed the nursery where we bought our first maple, and I touched the steering wheel like a handshake with my younger self. Men my age don't chase theatrics. We chase closure that sticks. The hall deposit cleared by lunch. The plan had a date, a door, and a welcome mat. Invitations tell a story long before the speeches. I opened a fresh spreadsheet and started with the circle that built us. Neighbors who shoveled our walk, co-workers who traded shifts, church friends who brought casseroles when Emily had the flu. Then I added the ones who needed to be there to hear the ending with their own ears. David and his wife. No anonymous messages later, no confusion recast as rumor. Names became rows, rows became seating. I kept the tone simple. Anniversary celebration, join us for a night of gratitude. The printer warmed up like an old truck, steady and loud. Emily offered to help stuff envelopes, and I let her, because ordinary rituals can hold heavy cargo. I didn't overshare. I addressed, stamped, and lined them up on the table like shingles ready for a roof. By evening, the mailbox held our future in paper form. The list wasn't long, it was exact. Every chair would matter when the lights dimmed. Laura lit up when I mentioned the venue. She started a folder, menu ideas, flowers, a song list that reached back to our first apartment. She practiced a toast in the mirror with a hairbrush, smiling at a version of us she believed would show up. I matched her note for note. I fixed a sticking door, touched up paint, and booked a sitter for the neighbor's toddler so they could attend. Friends texted champagne suggestions. I replied with thumbs up and a joke about not making the punch too strong. Laura tried on dresses and held them against her in the hallway light. The blue looked kind, the white looked like memory. She chose joy without glancing behind it. I set tasting appointments, took pictures of table layouts, and praised her choices. She leaned into me at the kitchen island and called me by my first name, sweet and simple. The performance fit like a suit. The smile stayed true enough to pass. Preparation felt like setting a stage for a school play, only the lesson wasn't pretend. I met the hall's tech guy, a retiree with calloused hands who said he'd run sound for everything from weddings to bingo. We walked the room together, counting outlets like treasure. I tested the projector with a generic slideshow and a song that once meant summer. The screen handled it fine. I mapped the order on note cards: welcome, toast, cake, truth. The video lived on a drive and 2 backups: glove box, jacket pocket. A small speaker would face the back row so no one could claim they missed what mattered. I labeled cables with tape because chaos loves unlabeled wires. That night, I practiced on our living room TV while the dog slept through my rehearsal. Tonight, I began, pulse steady, is about honesty. The words fit my mouth. They didn't taste bitter. They tasted clean, like cold water after a long hill. I took a night walk and ran the script in my head from parking lot to podium. Greeters at the door, hugs by the coat rack, a slide with our year 1 photo cued under soft light. I imagined the chairs filling, the scrape of metal legs, the sideways whispers people bring to milestone nights. I warmed my voice the way I used to before job interviews, hum low, then higher, so the mic would carry calm instead of tremor. The line mattered more than any other. Tonight is about honesty, not accusation, not theater. A clear ledger read out loud. I timed the video to land just as dessert reached midpoint, when plates soften people and eyes stay forward. On my desk, the outline sat beside a copy of our marriage license and Emily's first report card. Paper has weight. It keeps you from floating away. I didn't edit the plan anymore. I set it down, closed the folder, and let it breathe. The night arrived tidy as a Sunday shirt. Tables set, candles low, friends in their best versions. Laura came out of the dressing room in white, not bridal exactly, but close enough to stir a memory. The room lifted at the sight of her. Compliments flew like confetti you don't have to sweep. She touched my arm, squeezed twice, the old signal that used to mean we were in this together. I smiled and led her to the head table, pulled out her chair, and watched the fabric settle around her like a stage curtain before a show. Emily adjusted centerpieces, brave and busy, then met my eyes for a second that felt like a handshake. The tech guy gave me a thumbs up from the booth. The mic waited under a small pool of light. Guests raised glasses. The DJ lowered the music. I walked to the podium, the drive in my pocket like a key, and felt the room hold its breath. Champagne breathed up from the flutes, and the room did what rooms do on good nights. It lifted. Neighbors clapped for the caterer's bacon-wrapped dates. My foreman from the bridge job told the same story about the storm we beat by 6 minutes. The DJ spun a safe list, Motown, a Little Eagles, music that keeps a crowd together without arguing taste. Emily floated table to table with a practiced kindness, fixing napkins, whispering names to folks who forget. Laura glowed under the string lights, white dress catching every compliment like a net. She kissed my cheek and called me Michael the way she does when she wants a moment to shine. I raised my glass and thanked everyone for building our life alongside us. Carpools, casseroles, snow shovels, small mercies. Then I glanced at the booth. The tech lifted a thumb. The projector hummed awake like an old friend clearing his throat. The room finished laughing, and the quiet that followed understood its job. I took the mic and let it find my chest before it found the speakers. The podium smelled faintly of lemon polish and rental history. I looked at the faces, work boots polished for company, church dresses pulled from careful plastic, men and women who could tell our story better than any slideshow. "Thank you for loving us," I said. "Tonight is about honesty." The word didn't crack. It settled. Laura's hand rested on the table, wedding band catching light, eyes shining with the performance we'd rehearsed. I talked about firsts, first apartment couch rescued from a curb, first burnt casserole we ate anyway, first mortgage payment we called a miracle. Laughter landed where it should. Then I let the sentence I'd practiced walk the length of the room. "She wore white," I said, a mistake she'd regret. Chairs creaked. The DJ's finger froze above the next song. My thumb found the remote in my pocket like a final, quiet hinge. The screen bloomed from black to living room, familiar as a childhood scar. No narration, no apology. Just our bed, the light through our curtains, and the two people who had practiced being a secret. David entered, easy as always. Laura's shoulders softened the way they used to soften for me when money was tight and we made a joke of it. A hush took the room by the hand. Forks paused mid-air. Someone's bracelet clinked against glass and decided to be still. I let the video run without commentary. Explanations are for debates, not facts. In the front row, my boss leaned forward, elbows on knees like he does at job sites when a measurement matters. Emily stood near the coat rack, eyes steady, jaw set the way her mothers used to set in labor. My palm held the mic like a rail on a night stare. The projector fan whispered, and the truth did not blink. There's a sound that only rooms make when they realize they've been told the truth. It's not anger, not yet. It's a porch light flicked on across a whole neighborhood. David's mouth moved without words. Laura reached toward the screen as if it might turn back into a picture frame. Someone in the back said, "Oh my God," the way people do when a car skids but doesn't hit. The tech guy didn't move. He'd seen more human stories than a library. I lowered the volume so you could hear breathing. Theirs, the room's, mine. I didn't narrate. The pictures did that job. Cake waited on a side table and melted slightly at the edges. If you've ever watched a storm roll through a familiar town, you know the feeling. Landmarks stay put, but the sky forgets its promise. The clip ended where I'd trimmed it. No need for anything crueler. On the final frame, I took one step back and let silence work. Chairs speak first at moments like this. A scrape there, a stumble here, the metal voice of confusion trying to stand. David's wife stood all the way up, then sat down with care, hands flat on the table as if the room had started moving. Laura pushed her chair back and reached for me, not with love, but with the reflex that asks a firefighter to put the flame back in the match. "Michael," she began, and the mic politely took her voice away. I set it on the stand and folded my hands the way men fold hands at gravesides. Polite, still, old. In the corner, my foreman blinked fast and shook his head once, like a man counting to himself. A camera phone rose, then lowered, then rose again. The projector went to sleep with a small blue eye, and every conversation in the room evolved into breath. Impact measured itself, calmly, across linen and glass. Laura screamed my name in pieces. David stayed statue still, then tried a smile that died before it reached his cheekbones. A chair tipped. Someone caught it. Emily didn't cry. She moved to my side and stood there with her shoulders square, a posture I'll remember long after pictures fade. I raised one hand for quiet I didn't need. "No speeches," I said. "The record speaks." Record. The tech dimmed this projector completely. Lights came up just enough for people to find each other's faces. That's when the hall made its decision. Not a mob, not a sermon, just the steady shuffle of people deciding what they believed. My boss shook my hand on his way to the door. David's wife walked past both of them and didn't break pace. Laura tried again, but the sentence never learned how to walk. I thanked everyone for coming. A few nodded, a few hugged. The room exhaled. The night, finally, told the truth out loud. The first noise wasn't a shout. It was the staccato scrape of chair legs, the metal language of people standing too fast. Then the phones came up, little suns flickering over linen, and the room started taking pictures of a truth it wished it could unsee. Voices layered, a gasp, a no, a name broken into pieces. David's wife stood motionless, then moved like a person walking away from a fire that politely stayed in its fireplace. Laura tried to assemble a sentence and found only consonants. The tech killed the projector, leaving a blue dot that blinked like a heartbeat learning to be quiet. I rested the mic on the stand, squared the pages I hadn't needed, and let the quiet around me grow into a wall. The crowd reached for explanations. I offered none. The door by the coat rack swung like a porch screen in summer. I walked toward it, steady, shook the manager's hand, and stepped into the hallway's cooler air. The parking lot smelled faintly of cut grass and distant rain. Somewhere a teenager missed a gear shift. The grinding fit the night. I loosened my tie, placed the drive back in my pocket, and felt 20 pounds lift off bones I hadn't named in years. Silence can be louder than any scream. It carries farther, too. Behind the glass, the room kept buzzing like a transformer after a storm. I nodded to the custodian, signed the invoice with a handwriting that didn't wobble, and thanked him for the extra extension cord. He said, "Good night, sir," the way veterans speak to one another without comparing stories. The truck door shut with that hollow thump every dad recognizes. Safe, final, ordinary. I drove steady, no radio, counted green lights as if they were beads on a line I could hold. At a red, my phone lit with messages I wouldn't read yet. Home was 10 minutes away. I let those minutes do their job. Mornings took on the neat rhythm of forms. I met the lawyer in a conference room that smelled like coffee and copier toner and told the story in nouns, dates, files, names, timestamps. He nodded, asked for copies, and said words like equitable and uncontested that felt like new tools in an old box. We served papers by the book. A process server with polite shoes knocked at a door I used to open with my own key. Laura texted 3 sentences that tried to bargain, then 3 more that tried to wound. I answered once, short and clean, pointing everything to counsel. The account's untangled like cords if you're patient. Slow, inevitable, kinder when you don't yank. She packed the pieces of her life into quiet boxes and left for a city 2 hours north. The kind of place where people remake themselves under different porch lights. I signed where I was told. The judge's stamp sounded like a gavel in a door. At home, Emily and I picked up a rhythm that felt honest. We cooked simple, skillet dinners, a Sunday roast that made the whole place smell like patience. She took the dog on evening loops. I fixed the sticky window in her room and let her talk when she wanted, which wasn't often. In the car, we let the radio do half the conversation and the road do the rest. I reached out to the school counselor, not to unload, just to make sure Emily had one more adult who knew how to listen. She started leaving notes on the fridge. Need oat milk, algebra test, Thursday, proud of you, Dad. That worked better than speeches. One night at the sink, elbow to elbow with the dishes, she asked, "Are we okay?" I said, "We're going to be," and felt the sentence land in both of us like a beam set on straight studs. We didn't hug. We dried plates until they squeaked clean. We stood in the kitchen with the good light, the one that makes even a chipped mug look deliberate. I brewed coffee late, against doctor's advice, and poured hers into the blue cup she won at the county fair for a pie that didn't set right but tasted like summer anyway. The clock over the stove ticked in a way you only notice when life stops stalling. Emily leaned on the island and traced a ring in spilled sugar. "It's quieter," she said. "Quieter can be good," I answered. We weren't pretending to be brave. We were rehearsing a workable tomorrow. The dog huffed at a squirrel he'd never catch. A train moaned somewhere past the river. I raised my mug and waited for the right words to find their weight. They did. "We're free now," I said, and the house agreed. Something in the drywall loosened, like a held breath finally leaving. She nodded, not smiling exactly, but lighter, like a window unlatched. The next weekend, I opened the bedroom windows and let March air move through like a cleaning crew you don't have to tip. I boxed what needed boxing and set aside what Emily might want someday. Her baby book, the photo where the dog ruined our Christmas card by blinking. The dress Laura wore that night hung quiet in the closet. I carried it to the donation pile without a speech. I took down the lake photo, not because it lied, but because it was tired, and replaced it with a blank frame on purpose. Space is a kind of promise. The headboard stayed. It was built well, and I respect craft, even when it outlasts the moment that ordered it. I changed the sheets, flipped the mattress, and turned the camera off. Not deleted, off. On the dresser, I laid one ring box to rest and kept another, the one with Emily's birth bracelet. The room exhaled, and the house learned the word peace again. Most mornings start before the sun, the kitchen light soft, the house speaking quietly again now. I set out 2 mugs by habit, old wedding gift porcelain that remembers steadier seasons well. The kettle clicks, breathes, and I pour 1 cup full, leave the other deliberately empty today. That cup stays empty for a reason, a boundary you can see without any speech whatsoever. It reminds me survival isn't forgetting, it's remembering enough to stop inviting what hurts you back. I wash the unused mug, stack it away, and let the silence finish sentences for me. Neighbors wave during dog walks, and their small kindness lands like a light hand on lumber. Work is honest again, tasks fit the day, and the day fits what remains for me. Grief doesn't leave. It organizes, files itself properly, and stops pretending to be mystery at last. When steam curls from the single cup, I nod once, like signing a safer contract today. People keep advice on shelves, but the pieces that last are built into daily motions anyway. I lock doors, set lists, pay bills early, and call my sister back the same day. Protection looks like planning a future without pretending the past didn't stamp every wall here hard. Love isn't forgiveness, it's protection. A promise that what's left gets guarded with both hands now. I keep receipts in folders, keep laughter reachable, keep dinner simple enough to welcome tired days. Emily studies at the table, pencil tapping, and asks me for help only when necessary lately. We trade small victories, perfect pancakes, a fixed porch light, gas under $3 somewhere across town. When memories wander in, I seat them politely, serve coffee, and excuse them before bedtime gently. The dog sleeps easier now, proof that rooms can unlearn tension when people model steadiness daily. I leave the second mug untouched and let that absence teach what words rarely manage alone. Some truths don't heal. They harden into rails that keep you from driving off cliffs later. I learned patience watching epoxy cure, knowing strength comes slow and cracks appear when you rush. The same goes for trust rebuilt with a kid who saw more than any kid should. We talk in fragments during errands, letting the road mop up what sentences leave behind anyway. When she asks hard questions, I answer like a carpenter, measure twice, cut once, keep fingers safe. The past doesn't get invited to run the house, but it can sit quietly outside sometimes. Neighbors wonder how we're doing. I tell them we're building, and building takes time and quiet. On Sundays, I visit the lake, breathe the old air, and let regret watch from shore. When the wind pushes back, I lean forward, the way fathers do carrying groceries inside late. Back home, the empty mug waits, and I thank it for drawing the line gently daily. One evening, dishes stacked like neat bricks, Emily dried a pan and studied my face carefully. The radio murmured weather and ball scores, safe noise we borrow when words feel heavy together. She set the towel down, leaned on the counter, and asked, "Do you miss her?" "Dad." I looked at the second mug, clean and ready, and felt the house hold still kindly. "Not anymore," I said. Not cruel, just honest, like reading numbers off a tape that day. She nodded once, an adult's nod, then smiled small, the way people smile after storms pass. We wiped the counters, turned off lights, and let the hallway guide us toward earlier sleep. Before bed, I wrote tomorrow's list, because tomorrow likes a list more than speeches from me. In the mirror, a man blinked back, "Who knows protection is love done with discipline daily." I clicked the kitchen light, left one cup waiting, and let the house sleep satisfied tonight. I stand in the kitchen with the light low and the house breathing at a normal pace. One cup poured, one left empty, a boundary you can see without argument. I lift the mug, hold it steady, and let the line I earned arrive. Revenge isn't about rage, it's patience. It's knowing when to hold your breath until the world forgets you're underwater. The room accepts it. Emily sleeps down the hall, safe enough to dream in color. I'm not here to celebrate damage. I'm here to say the evidence mattered, the planning mattered, the way back matters most. I make peace with the part of me that waited and the part that finally moved. Love, done right, protects what remains and keeps tomorrow usable. I open the window and thank the night for carrying what I'm done carrying. I take a slow sip, set the cup down, and ask the only honest question left. What would you have done?